Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll get started in about 1 more minute as folks are trickling in. We are recording this, so I just want to make folks aware of that as you're coming in. Got a few more folks trickling in.
That's nice. We're getting floating around.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative grant application webinar for the Service Provider and Producer Association grant for FY25, which is the year we're in now. My name is Claire Salerno. I'm the program coordinator for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'll be leading the presentation today and excited to see you all and answer questions. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Diana, who I'll let her introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diana Ferguson, also she, her pronouns. I'm a grants management specialist with the Agency of Agriculture supporting this program, and I will join later in the presentation to give you a demonstration of actually how to start and complete an application in Web Grants. Thanks, Claire.
Awesome. And if any of you or other folks that may be watching the recording later on want or need to receive this information in an alternative format or have other accessibility requests related to this information or the application, you can contact me. My email and phone are on the screen here. Generally, I work state hours, which are 7:45 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. And again, we are recording this that we will post online, so you can go back and rewatch it if you need to, or share with other folks that were not able to make it today. We'll also share the slides over email with you and also on our website so anyone can access them. We're using the PowerPoint Live feature on Microsoft Teams. So in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, it should say 2 of 22 slides. And if you prefer to navigate through the slides, so you can look ahead or look back on something as I'm speaking, you should be able to do that. And yeah, please mute when not speaking, and we'll have I'll do an overview of the program and the grant, and then Diana will do a screen share of some of the technical elements of how to apply. Feel free to use the chat or raise your hand to interrupt with questions. Otherwise, we will definitely have time at the end. And I'm also happy to meet one-on-one with any of you as well. Yeah, so just an overview for folks that maybe aren't familiar with the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. This is a state program that was created in 2012 that manages and invests about $1 million annually into agricultural and forestry-based businesses. Over the course of the program, there's been about $16 million awarded, and in fiscal year 25, which is the state fiscal year we're in now, there is $1 million available. 1 million is as of 2 years ago, is the base allocation that the program receives every year. The state budget sometimes allocates additional special funds, but that was not the case this year. And our vision is that our shared working landscape is the foundation of Vermont's evolving culture, vibrant economies, healthy ecosystems, and sense of place. And our mission is to make strategic investments and develop policy recommendations that support a resilient and sustainable farm, food, and forest economy in Vermont. Who is involved? So Diana and I are two of the staff members at the Agency of Agriculture that support this program. We have a third member of our team, Elizabeth Sipple, is the program manager. But the Working Lands Enterprise Board is the main group of people that make all of the grant decisions and steer the program overall. And they're made up of people like you, Vermont farm, food, and forest product business owners, different business assistance organizations, and then leadership from 3 different state agencies: the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, Commerce and Community Development, and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. But the majority of the board are seats that are specifically for farm, food, and forest product business owners. So for example, there's a seat for a maple sugar maker, there's a seat for a dairy farmer, there's a seat for a logger or sawmill business owner or operator. And you can read more about the board on our website. You should be able to click that link within the presentation. And then Working Lands grants applications are reviewed and awarded through a competitive review process guided by people with experience operating a farm, food or forestry business, providing business assistance services, stewarding public dollars, and more. And the Working Lands Enterprise Board participates in that review and makes the ultimate award decisions, but there are many additional folks with that kind of experience listed here that are part of the review process. And we are so grateful to have many voices involved in making the grant decisions. And just to give some background on the annual grant cycle, for this program and for many state programs, the state fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So like I mentioned, we're in state fiscal year 2025. And we have to award all of that $1 million by the end of June of next year, but we aim to do it well before then. And yeah, so this is just kind of an overview that once the state budget passes in May, we have a sense of how many funds there might be for the next year. Over the summer, the Working Lands Enterprise Board convenes their annual symposiums to strategize the different grant opportunities that will be available. And generally in the fall is when we do these kind of outreach and webinars and tee up the upcoming application process. And depending on the number of grants that might be available in a given year, typically they open and close in the fall, starting September, and then into the early winter in January. And then starting in late fall through the spring, again, depending on the timing and number of applications, the board makes final decisions and we communicate that with applicants and work to finalize the grant agreements. So for fiscal year 2025, there is the base allocation of $1 million available to award through 3 different grants. The first one being the Service Provider and Producer Association grant, which we'll be discussing today. And then the other 2 grants will be the Business Enhancement Grant and the Trade Show Assistance Grant. Those have all been offered before. The Business Enhancement Grant is probably the most well-known Working Lands grant that's more specifically for businesses to purchase like equipment, infrastructure, sometimes marketing projects. So if that actually is what you're more interested in, that one is not open yet. It will open on October 18th, and we will have a webinar specific to that one. The grant we're discussing today, the Service Provider and Producer Association grant, is specifically for like business assistance organizations and trade associations to provide support to businesses, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Many of you may have seen that in past years there have been many more grants offered, such as the Supply Chain impact grant, which are larger dollar amounts up to $250,000. Those are not being offered this year because the $1 million available this year is significantly less than has been available in the past few years. In the future, if the state budget provides more funds, those higher dollar grants may be offered again. So the timeline specifically for this grant, the Service Provider and Producer Association grant, many of you may be aware that it opened on Friday, and our full request for applications with all of the application information was released on Friday on our website, which we'll talk more about in a second. Today we're having the webinar. The application will close on Thursday, November 7th at 11:59 p.m. And then we'll be notifying folks in early January. And for folks that are awarded, we'll work to get the documentation finalized in January and the project starting in February or March. Okay, I'm seeing that someone can't see the slides. Is that the case for multiple folks? If so, I'm sorry about that. I did not realize that has not been an issue before.
I think they're just asking to have the link to refer back to later, Claire. That's my guess.
Okay, yes, I will definitely send out the slides after this so that you can look through them. And this is being recorded so that you can watch it as well. Okay. The eligible applicants for this grant is specifically for service providers, which are organizations that provide business support services to agricultural and forest businesses, and then producer associations, which are groups that represent and promote Vermont agriculture, food, beverage, forest, or fiber products. So again, this grant is not specifically for like a single farm business or a single like sawmill or other food business. It's more focused on organizations, which can be nonprofit or for-profit, that are about providing like business support services to agriculture and forestry businesses. And generally, applicants should be based in Vermont, but if your business organization is headquartered outside of Vermont, but is looking for funding for a project that's 100% focused on Vermont's working landscape and businesses, it is likely eligible, but please reach out to me and we can chat more specifically about that. And then if you are a past working lands grant or contract, either applicant or recipient in any year, you can reapply for funding, whether it's for a new type of service or project for your association or for continuing the same work, but with a new group of businesses. And so the types of projects that this grant is for, there's sort of two main buckets. The first one is that projects that provide direct or indirect services to support Vermont-based working lands businesses. So that might be doing like working one-on-one or in groups with businesses to do market analysis and development or marketing plans, doing business and financial planning, helping businesses respond to COVID, flooding, or other crises that have been coming up, working with businesses on succession planning, working with businesses on access to capital, helping businesses think through manufacturing or process flow, broader business research and development, and like workforce development activities. So it's a pretty broad type of services. If there's something related to these that you don't see here and you have a question about, please feel free to reach out to us to discuss if it's eligible. But the main piece is that the services should be focused on agriculture and forestry businesses, even if the content is general and could apply to lots of types of businesses. And then the other bucket is projects that develop a producer association. So if you're representing an association that represents Vermont food, forestry, beverage, agriculture products and are looking for funds for specific leadership and organizational development activities, so such as like strategic planning or board training, committee work, staff training, that type of thing. Membership development, so funds for member recruitment and outreach, networking among members, member skill building, and exchanges or development of digital tools for members. Those are pretty common projects that we've seen through this grant before. And then also, if you're looking to collaborate with other producer associations, that is also eligible. So just more kind of nuts and bolts on the eligible projects. The minimum and maximum award, there's sort of 2 tiers that you can apply at, and this is a new structure for us. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out about it. But generally, we're steering anyone that has a pilot project, so something that's brand new, or is an initiative that you started in the last 1 to 2 years and you're looking for funding for, or if it's a project that's focused specifically on a certain region. So say you're working in the Northeast Kingdom or Southern Vermont, or the Burlington area, whatever it may be, if it's like a sub-region of Vermont, we are steering either pilot projects or local regional projects to the $10,000 to $25,000 range. And then if it is a statewide project that is not a pilot project, but an established program, you can apply for a $25,000 to $75,000 range. And there is no matching fund requirement for this grant. And we have a total of about $370,000 available to award. So how competitive it is, I think, really depends on how many people apply and the size of award that people are looking at. If there's a lot of pilot or regional projects, then there'll be a lot more projects that can be funded. If it's all statewide projects, there'll be fewer. And then the project length will be about a 15-month project starting in February, March of 2025, and then that grant end date will be in June of 2026. And any of the grant funds cannot cover any spending that happens before the grant is awarded in early 2025. So you can't use the grant to like reimburse for work that's happening right now. It would have to be something that you're planning to do starting in next winter, spring. Thank you, Diana, for managing the chat. And I'm sorry about the slides issue, but we'll definitely share those out for folks that are having issues. So the sort of 2 basic pieces of how to apply that folks should be aware of is the first step is to read the request for applications, which is abbreviated to BRFA. And the RFA is a document that has all of the information about the grant and the application, which includes all of the overview information that I just went through, probably with a little bit more details for some of those more specific scenarios or more examples. It has our contact information, the deadline and everything, the eligibility criteria that I just went over, and then it also has all of the application questions listed out so that you can see them. And then it has the scoring criteria that will be used to score each application. And then information about if you're awarded a grant, sort of how the payments work, what you would need to do for reports to manage that grant during the grant period. So it's really your main piece of information that should have everything that you need. And we recommend that everybody reads it all the way through before applying for a grant, because that has all of the information. But you cannot submit a paper application. You have to actually do the application online in Web Grants, which is our online system that we'll walk through later. So we recommend everyone read through the request for applications, gets familiar with what's in it, and then you go to Web Grants to submit the actual application. And we do our best to help with any information or any tech issues that you might have. We can't always help like the day of the deadline at 10 p.m., but as much as possible before then, we're always available to troubleshoot any issues you're having. And then if you're awarded a grant, you will also continue to use web grants to submit reports and request payments. All right, so this is more just the step-by-step of how to apply if you're someone that likes to see things in kind of list order. So the first step is to review the full RFA for all of the details on the full application process. If you don't already have a web grants account, the next step would be to register, which we do have to manually approve, so it may take up to 2 business days. So we definitely recommend that you do that now and not like the day the application is due. And then you'll complete the application in web grants. We have a separate web grant specific guide with some screenshots to walk you through the tech pieces, which again, we can also support with. So just going over the application content, which again, you can read all of this in the RFA, and these are the sections that you'll go through in web grants as you complete the application. So first, there's just an overview of information about the applicant. New as of last year, we do have a voluntary demographic survey, which is listed in web grants, but the link in the actual survey is outside of web grants. So it is totally voluntary and it's anonymous and not linked to your application, but we do appreciate if you're willing to complete it so we can get a better sense of who is applying and what groups of folks we might need to be reaching more of. And then there's a project information section, which is a summary of what you're trying to do, information about your organization, the different staff and partners involved, the target audience of your grant project, and that type of thing. And then there's a table for you to complete around what are the top 3 to 5 goals and expected outcomes of your project. So this might be something like you want to train all of your board members on a certain topic. It might be you want to like increase your web traffic to a certain amount that you would identify, or train, 25 businesses so that they all have a marketing plan in place. Whatever is relevant to your project. And we have some additional guidance in that section to help you think through how to fill it out. The next piece is the work plan, which is just a step-by-step of the activities, the main activities that you'll be doing. And then a project budget for any of the grant funds that you'll be using. And if you are, there is no match requirement, but say that you are applying for the max amount of $75,000 for work that actually is going to cost $100,000, we would ask that you document that additional $25,000 in the budget so that you can say what it's paying for and where it's coming from. Or even if you have a program you want to do that costs, like you're going to hire someone and use staff time, and for whatever reason, if the staff time is already covered through some other grant or through your organization and you just need this grant to hire someone, we would ask that you include that additional staff time or whatever it is that your organization is providing, just so we can get a sense of how much the whole project costs and understand that there's other funds being used for it. If you have any budget items outside of your own organization's salaries or benefits that cost more than $5,000, you will need to upload a cost estimate or quote for those items. And then there's a section for additional attachments. And the only thing that is required is specifically for producer associations that are applying for organizational development activities. So if that's anything related to like board capacity building, staff training, sort of like internal operations funds at a producer association, you will need a letter of support from the association's board. Otherwise, other applicants are welcome to upload any letters of support or commitment from your board, organizational partners, anybody that is in support of the project or will be playing a role and wants to write a letter outlining that. You're welcome to do that, but it's not required. And then you can upload any other documents that you think would be helpful to explain the project to reviewers. So that could be like if you're updating your website, a screenshot of what things look like now, or a mock-up of something that has already been done. Again, that's not required, but if there are things that you already have or that you feel like would be helpful for someone to understand what you're proposing, you're welcome to upload them there. And then everybody has to upload and complete a water quality compliance form, which is just you certifying that your organization is not under any kind of legal enforcement with the state water quality division. I see, Vern, your question is if the president of the board is the primary applicant, who should write the required letter? That is a good question. I think, yeah, you would just want the letter that is signed, yes, by another board member, I think, to show that it's a collaborative piece approved by the board. But we can also talk offline about that, Vern. Okay. Scoring criteria. This is on page 14 of the RFA. So I've listed them, they're listed in order of points available, and the kind of highest point categories are the overall quality of the concept and the management team. So like, does this project make sense? Is there a need for it? Is like the work that's being proposed a reasonable like response to what the need is? And is this organization like in a place to do the project? The expected measurable outcomes, which we talked a little bit about, again, showing that the project will have whatever impact it may have, and that's clear and that those can be achieved in the grant period. The budget, which again is mostly around clarity of the budget, that there are quotes if there are items more than $5,000. Collaboration is around if there are partners that are involved, that they're committed, that they make sense, and that also this project isn't totally duplicating other work that other organizations might be doing. The demonstrated need is around whether there's a clear need for the work that's happening. And then engagement, equity, and equality is around if the project is having a positive impact on historically marginalized or historically underserved communities. And then the financial need is based on a couple of the budget questions. So there's a lot of different elements here. They are weighted different amounts, but I do want to emphasize that an application can be strong without scoring highly in all scoring categories. Not everyone may have like a high financial need, but if this is a great project in other ways, it's highly collaborative, it's ready to go, it can certainly still be funded. Same with if it's not specifically impacting in a positive way historically marginalized communities, and all the other pieces are really strong, it can still be funded. If there's not a collaborative element, but all the other pieces are strong, it can still be funded. So the idea is to pay attention to these things and make sure that you're addressing all of them in the application, but I would say don't panic if you feel like there's maybe one element that your project is less strong in, if the other pieces feel strong. Great. So I will stop there with my content overview and stop sharing and let Diana share a demo of the web grants system and how to apply.
Thanks so much, Claire, and thank you everyone for listening. I know it's a lot of information to take in, and I'm going to stay on that train and throw some more information at you, but this will be a visual demonstration of how to access the grant application in web grants. So if you have used web grants before, it may be familiar to you, but it's great to just pop in there and, you know, if you're somewhere on the learning curve, get familiar with the layout of the website. If you've never used web grants, it can take some time to get familiar with. So we'd encourage you to start your application early if you're planning to do that. So I am just going to pull up my screen here. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, here we go. All right. Can you see that? Claire, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay,
I see it.
So this is the login page for web grants. It's the one system that we use at Agency of Agriculture for grant applications, as well as awarding, reporting, and everything under the umbrella of grants management. So if you happen to use it many years ago, it has had an upgrade, a software refresh, so it looks a little bit different than it did a few years ago. So if this is your first time and you haven't yet registered, then you can visit this link, click here to register with the yellow button. It only takes about a minute or two. There's sometimes announcements logistically related on the homepage. If you have an organization where you will have multiple folks working on the application, we'd recommend that everybody has their own login, and we can give you multiple people access to the application. So you're not having to share one name, and we know who to contact if we need to, if anyone needs support. So once you have your login, once you register, it can take 1 to 2 days to approve, and then you'll get on our side, and then you'll get an email with your automatically generated password. And I'll show you how you can set your own password if you'd like to do that. I'm going to sign in using a test account. There are links here if you forgot your ID or password in the future, or if it's been a year or two since you've been in the system, if you need to do that. All right, so just logging in, and once you do that, you'll arrive at what's called the dashboard. If you have other grants, they'll show up here. You may have deadlines or reports coming up. If you have never applied for a grant before, you might not see much, and that's okay. I will point to these gray buttons on the left-hand side are sort of your primary navigational tools. So if you go down to the very last one, you'll see My Profile. You can click on that. If you, again, have been in web grants before and maybe any information has changed, or if you register and then in the future any of your contact information changes, then please come here to My Profile, and you can click this green button, Edit My Profile, and that you can adjust any of your contact information. And then here, of course, the blue button, you can reset your password to something that's more memorable than the one the system gave you. And so just a note to keep that up to date so that if we need to reach out to you, we have the right info. If you have an active grant application already, if you've already started your application, then this is where you'll access it under applications. If you have not yet started an application, then you'll go to funding opportunities. It's confusing because we have grants here, but that's only if you are awarded a grant. So funding opportunities is where you will go to see the list of all of the grants that are currently accepting applications from our agency, and those that are green posted are currently accepting. So we'll go ahead and click. You can click, if you see we move the mouse anywhere in the green bar. Once you've highlighted, we're going to open our Service Provider and Producer Association grant application. We have a couple tests already going, as you can see, but otherwise you will not have anything here. We just have a couple tests, but these are this is just information about the program itself, which is reiterated in the request for applications. It's nothing new, but it's just a reminder. So to start a brand new application, you'll click here in the green, on the green button on the right, Start New Application. And what that will do is launch a 3-step application wizard that basically just creates the framework for your application in the system. So the first thing you'll do is enter a title for your application or your project. And primary contact, your name, first and last name will show up here. And those are just the first 2 steps. You're going to click Save Form Information on the right. Generally, when you're in the system, the green button on the right is the key to your next step. So just something helpful to know. So now after you've saved, you're still on the same page. It's saved your title and your name. And now it's going to confirm that the right organization is showing up. If you are associated with multiple, make sure that the correct one is showing here by organization, and then you're going to click Save again. And then the third and final step in the application wizard is optional, and that's if you have, as I mentioned, any other coworkers or colleagues that would like to collaborate on the grant application. And if you do, first have them register in the system, and then you can click and select their name from additional contacts so that you can collaborate and everyone will see the same content when you log in to work on the application. So if you are just doing it yourself, that's fine. You can skip this step and just click Save Form Information a third and final time. And what that will do is open you up to the content or the forms that make up the application. So you can see your application status is in editing. Here is the information related to your grant application. And then down here under application details is where you'll see each of the individual forms that make up the application. So the wizard that you just completed sets up the general information form, and that's already complete. And then you've got all of these other application forms that you can complete in any order. I'm just going to open one. I'm going to open the first one and give you a little preview. I won't complete an entire application because that would take some time, but I will say this first form is the universal application form, which applies to anyone who's applying for a grant under our agency or our division rather. So these are questions that may be familiar if you've applied to another grant in the past. Anything that's in red with an asterisk is required. Anything that's in black, for example, down here, is optional. So we just ask you to complete it as thoroughly as possible. And so let's see, if I enter some information and I'm ready to go have lunch and walk away, I can click Save Form up on the top right, and that will save the information that I've entered, but you can then come back and edit it at any point. So it saved my test name, but all of the other fields are blank. So as you can see, after you save, you're in this sort of view only mode. And so you can log out, log back in, come back at any time, and then click Edit Form again to reopen to the editing view. And so then when you're completely done with this form from top to bottom, you can click Mark as complete. And of course, because I have incomplete sections, it's giving me an error message and telling me, please complete the sections with these names before you can move on. So that's just something to know. Mark is complete. The orange button is something you'll need to do for each individual form before the system will allow you to submit the application. You can navigate back using this back button towards the top left, or you can navigate through the application using these shorthand links where you can see if you hover over, you see the full name of the next form. So say you just completed the universal application form, you're ready for the project information form. You can click right there, and that will move you through to the next form. And then you can essentially do the same thing that I just mentioned before. Enter your information, save form, mark as complete, and at any point you can go back to the main menu and see your progress. Sometimes in web grants it's a little bit clunky with navigating back and forth. Sometimes when you click back you will arrive at a completely different page, and that just is something that happens sometimes. So you know, you can keep multiple tabs open if you need to. This app list right here, the furthest link on the left, is the same thing as the application details menu, which is what we had seen before with all of the individual forms. So as you can see, I've edited these first two. I've still only completed the first one. Once you've edited and completed every form, you'll see a green check mark all the way down for each one, and then this red arrow right here will change to green and it will say application may be submitted, and at that point you'll have an orange submit button pop up right here next to the preview button. We do recommend that you do the preview. Once you're totally done, that will show you your whole application in one page. You can scroll all the way down, read all your content, make sure that it's complete and accurate before you submit, because once you submit, it kicks it over to us and it cannot be edited after that point. So essentially that is the application process. Like I said, I won't go through every form, but I will point out Each form is formatted a little bit differently. Some of them are narrative questions, some of them are drop down. These goals, work plan, and budget forms are tables that you complete. They're all a little bit different, and they do have instructions at the top. So if you get stumped, look at the instructions, make sure you're following them. There's a water quality certification form at the end, which is just an upload to certify that you are not out of compliance with water quality regulations in Vermont. And then so each of these forms, as Claire mentioned, is detailed in the request for applications. So to save yourself some time in web grants, definitely read the whole RFA so you know what you're in for. And then, come into web grants once you're prepared to actually put your content in. I will point out here this web grants application guide, which is linked in our presentation that lives on our website. This is a step-by-step guide, essentially, of what I just showed you, with screenshots of how to move from beginning to end of submitting an application. So if you, need a refresher or have someone who's working with you who has not used web grants before, it can be helpful to read this application guide before you get started, just so you're a little more familiar with how to manage. And then we also reference these working lands application frequently asked questions. These are also linked in the slides that Claire's sharing. This is just some good background information. And if you have questions as you're completing an application, a good reference page for just, some frequently asked questions. But of course, Claire and I are available if you need support during the process. It can take some time, so certainly we recommend getting started sooner rather than later. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now. And Claire, maybe you can pick back up with the presentation. But I will just, say that web grants is a little bit clunky at times. It's not always intuitive. And so if you have read the RFA, you've read the web grants application guide, you're in web grants and you're just still hitting a dead end, feel free to reach out to me. Claire is available for programmatic questions and project related questions. I'm available for web grants technical support. So I'm happy to walk you through something if you hit a snag at any point. Next slide. Just a few tips for folks, especially if you've never applied for a grant before. I referred to those FAQs on the website already and recommended certainly get started as soon as you can. There is typically we get a handful of folks asking for support the last week of the application period. So if you start early, we'll have more time to help you if you need it. Don't be afraid to reach out. We are not able to review individual applications. If you've crafted your responses and you want feedback, that's not an area where we can support, but we can, Claire can help you in refining your project or determining if it's eligible, or just if you feel like you need some advisement to make sure you're on the right track. She can help you by phone or email or both. And we mentioned the web grants application guide. One tip that some folks really find helpful is, since you have all of the application questions in the RFA, type up your responses in a Word document. That way you have everything ready and you can just copy and paste everything into web grants rather than having to log in and out of the system so many times. It would be impressive if you were able to do the whole application in one sitting. I wouldn't try it. So it's nice to just sometimes compose everything outside of the system, and that saves you some time and effort. A couple more resources and tips. Just consider the grant reviewers on the other side. So we'll have a panel of folks who are associated with the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative from a staff or board or volunteer perspective who serve as our reviewers. And so as you're writing, we know you're familiar with your business or your operation or your the folks who make up your organization, what you do every day, but please just assume that whoever is reading your application knows nothing and start from scratch. It's really helpful to have that background information. And we do love to know what your organization is about, but we also encourage you to focus on specifically this project with the problem that the project is trying to address. There are character counts in the application, but you know, as thorough as you can be on specifically what your project is trying to accomplish will really help, especially if you've already done some back work or this project is coming at a point in time where it helps to explain, here's what's led us to this point. That's really helpful for reviewers to know. If you run out of room within the character counts, you can continue composing a response and upload it in the attachment section, which is at the end of the application. And if you do not end up getting funded, we can absolutely provide feedback at your request for what would help to strengthen the application in the future. Of course, we wish we had enough funds for everyone, but you know, from the reviewer standpoint, we do take note of the feedback that comes through on every application that is not funded, and we're happy to share that if it's helpful to you. Thanks for hanging in there. I know there's a lot of information and there's a little bit more here on the logistical side, just to prepare you if you are submitting an application to, you know, if you are awarded, there are some forms that will be needed right away to get you into the state system so that you can receive your funds. And one of those is an IRS W-9 form that has to be signed in the past 6 months. That's pretty standard, but there can be some very particular recommendations around crafting that correctly. So make sure to follow the IRS instructions there to avoid any holdups. A certificate of insurance or a COI, that's something that your agent can provide you. Attachment C is linked here, which is standard state provisions for all grantees, and that outlines the requirements for general liability, automobile, and workers' comp insurance. If those all apply to you, of course, as the grants and contracts person, I can email with you. If your project does not relate to some of those coverages, we can talk about that. If and when you're awarded, I'm happy to be a resource there. And just a reminder that if you are awarded, project costs are only eligible once your grant agreement has been signed. So even though you're doing great work now and you know, have people that are working hard on the application and work that maybe relates to your project, funds can only be expended from your grant towards your project once the grant is considered underway, which is after it's been signed and by you and then co-signed by our agency leadership. So those are just a few things to keep in mind as you're heading into the application process. Happy to answer questions, and then Claire, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Yeah, just to give you some information about some past projects in the Service Provider and Producer Association grant. And I suppose it may have been helpful for folks that maybe have applied or received a grant before. In the past, these were 2 separate grants. There was one grant for service providers and one for producer associations, but they did have a lot of similar elements. So we've combined into one application, and I think I talked, you know, at the beginning about some of the different like subtypes of projects, especially for those producer associations. But we're excited to be able to have everyone together. But yeah, on our website, which is linked here, we have lists of funded projects for the Service Provider and Producer Association grants going back many years. The Service Provider grant has been offered since the early days of the program in like 2013, 14. The Producer Association specific piece came about in 2022. So yeah, you can see just a list and like a brief summary of the funded projects, or on our blog, we've got a few longer stories about some of these projects. Yeah, some photos of them here. The Vermont Sheep and Goat Association did some association development work and did some workshops, which is what's pictured here. UVM Extension, their Our Vermont Woods program. I do believe we do have a blog post about that one that you're welcome to read about from, I believe, 2019, doing some storytelling around landowners and the forest products sector and forestry. And then Clean Economy Works is here on the right, which received a grant to do some grant writing support for working lands businesses to apply for federal energy efficiency grants. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the range of the types of projects that this grant could fund. I'm sure there are also many of you or organizations that are doing great work that haven't been funded before or aren't familiar. So I think there's lots of room for new awards and new projects to be funded through this. Yeah. And then in terms of staying in touch with us, we do have a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for. On the Vermont Agency of Agriculture website, there is a grants calendar that shows the different grants offered throughout the year. Many of those are specifically for farms, but not all of them. We do have a social media page. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, please feel free to reach out to me. Email, my phone is there. It is a cell phone, so I can receive texts. And those are my general hours of availability. Okay, I see there's a question in the chat around a target allocation of funds to award to service providers and to producer associations. We do not. So I think there's the total pool of 370,000. I think we expect to fund a mix. I think in past years, which is part of why we combined them, I think in past years, maybe there were slightly fewer funds allocated total, but we tended to have about 4 grants in each area that ranged from like 10 to 30,000. So there isn't a specific pool for each. Yeah, I would guess I will, to add to that, in the past, our business enhancement grant has been very competitive, and typically only around 20% of projects get funded. In the past, as we've done these separate service provider and producer association grants, they've not been very competitive, and we've been able to fund between 70 to 100% of the projects. But we do have this kind of larger pool this year, and so I can't say if it will be, and again, depending on the size of the award people apply for, yeah, I don't know if it will be super competitive, more like our business grants, or if most folks will be able to be awarded. So I would say just focus on your project and your application and making it clear, since that is the element that you and that you'll have control over. And then the last thing I'll say, just Diana was talking about time. I think it's a range of the time that people put into the application. I would say the minimum end, if you're someone you've got all of your info, you don't have any quotes, you maybe already have a letter, you've got kind of all your extra info that you'd want to put in. I would minimum say like 1 to 2 hours if you're like ready to go. But I would say for most folks, I would look to allocate like 3 to 8 hours of time, but that's really an estimate. We're actually trying to get more information on how long it takes people to do the application, so we have a better estimate to provide folks. So I'm sorry I can't give a more clear answer on that. But yeah, feel free to put any questions in the chat or raise your hand or unmute if there's anything else you're wondering. Yeah, Lila.
Hey, I was just wondering if a fundraising consultant would be a good fit for this grant, like hiring one.
Yeah, I think that would be, I don't know if that's something, Diana, if that's specifically been, yeah, we have, and sorry, I'm just thinking of examples. There have been grants in the past I'm thinking more specifically of a producer association grant where the funds went towards like development work and actually some like staff training and hiring of a development person. So I think that could be a use of funds. Indirect costs, that's a good question in the chat. Up to 10% of your budget, your grant funds can be for indirect costs. So that would be for like your own staffing, facilities, costs. And there's some information about that in the budget section to guide you through that. Great. Well, we will wrap things up in a second unless anyone has other questions. And I will be able to post the recording probably tomorrow. I don't know that it will be able to be up today. And I'll also post the slides on our website. The slides should be visible in the recording. And then the slides will also be available on our website. And if anyone would like to set up a follow-up call, you have my contact information. Great. Thank you, everyone.